UMC rolled out nDorse hospital-wide in early July of 2017 as a way to foster a culture of recognition and to help develop a culture of excellence throughout the hospital. In just under 300 days, the following measurable data has been collected. There have been 14,406 endorsements sent. With over 2,000 employees, that could average out to 7 independent pieces of recognition since the launch of nDorse. However, that's the law of averages. In actuality, there are some standout people, like Chanel Johnson in Patient Access, who has received 70 endorsements, Mason Green in MedSurg ICU, who has received 60 endorsements, Lauren Freitag in the ED, who has received 52 endorsements, and so many others. We also had several employees recognized as compassionate caregivers during Kindness Week, like Loris Greathouse, who was recognized for compassion and endorsed by Toya Smith. Loris won 2 PJ's gift cards and promptly gave one to her coworker in the OR because she not only espoused the core value of compassion, but also teamwork. Furthermore, there are 1,230 users within nDorse at UMC, and around 80% of all employees have received at least one endorsement. That's a lot of recognition in just around 9 months. But let's get to the meat of it. Is this impacting employee engagement? We pulled data from the engagement surveys, which were proctored in October of 2017. We cross-referenced that with data pulled from nDorse from July of 2017 until October of 2017, which was when the survey was administered. The data collected looks at 52 departments and 2,160 employees spread across the entire hospital. First, we looked at the impact nDorse utilization had on engagement scores. To measure this, we defined utilization as one person receiving one endorsement. So, for example, in a department that has 10 employees, if 8 of those employees received an endorsement, that department would have a utilization rate of 80%. We compared that with the overall question, where 0 is the worst possible place to work and 10 is the best possible place to work. How would you rate this organization as a place to work, as scored by each department? So for instance, if you take a department like Quality and Patient Safety, the data from nDorse said that that department had a utilization rate of 87%. We compared that with the data we pulled from the NRC Engagement Survey, which said that that department increased 43.4 points on the rating as a place to work question from 2016 to 2017. We pulled those 2 pieces of data for each of the 52 departments across the hospital to see if there was correlation between nDorse utilization and growth in the rating as a place to work question on the NRC Engagement Survey. And when we examined this data, looking at the average growth in scores on the y-axis and the nDorse utilization on the x-axis, here's what we found. Departments that had utilization under 50%, that means less than 50% of their employees had been endorsed, grew on average 2.34 points. Departments with utilization between 50 and 75% grew on average 8.74 points. But then we saw departments with utilization between 75 and 100% only grow 5.9 points. This was not the correlation we were expecting. However, what we saw was that in this top grouping of 75 to 100% utilization, we found over 60% of the departments fell in that category. In the middle category, we saw that 30% of the departments fell in that one. And then the bottom category, well, you can do the math. The great problem that we had was that the utilization rate across the hospital was too high to compare it to the other departments. So we had to think, what's another way that we can compare this data? We went off the premise that using nDorse once wasn't enough. So instead, what if we looked at departments that had a high number of endorsements to see if there's a correlation between high utilization of nDorse, the high number of average endorsements that each employee received, and the overall rating as a place to work question. So, similar to the last graph, we're looking at the overall rating as a place to work on the y-axis. Down here on the x-axis, we're comparing it to the average number of endorsements per person. We'll call this first group the one endorsement group. This group represents around 17 departments in which employees in those 17 departments received about one endorsement. These 17 departments grew on average 4.45 points on the rating as a place to work question. The second group we'll call the two endorsement group. This group also represents around 17 departments, and on average, employees within these departments received 2 endorsements. This grouping grew on average 6.55 points. And then our final grouping also represents around 17 departments. On average, these employees received 3 or more endorsements, and they grew 7.21 points on the rating as a place to work question. And when we put all of the data from the 52 departments into a linear regression calculator, we found that there was a zero point 0.8 correlation between the number of endorsements that a person received and the growth in the rating as a place to work score. But first, a quick word of caution. We're basing all of this data off of just 1 year, and while we're incredibly optimistic and hopeful about what this data is showing us, we have to remember that correlation does not imply causation, as there are so many things going into the incredible work happening every single day here. And remember that at the root of this, nDorse is just a tool that any leader or any employee can use. Much like department meetings or rounding or any one-to-one coaching, these are all tools that can go into your toolbox, which have a huge impact on employee engagement. However, what we really wanted to see was, does it actually have an impact on employee engagement when an employee's direct manager recognizes you? Using the data that we pulled from nDorse and once again the NRC Health Survey, we were able to see that correlation. We looked at 3 different groupings this time. The first, the low manager utilization of 0 to 7%. And what that means is a direct manager only recognized between 0 and 7% of their direct reports in nDorse. The second grouping was the medium manager utilization. That manager only recognized between 8 and 24% of their direct reports. And then finally, we have the high manager utilization. This is a manager who recognized 25% or more of their direct reports in nDorse. We then compared that data to 3 different buckets. The first being overall rating as a place to work, similar to the previous 2 pieces of data. We then looked at manager investment as a key driver within NRC Health, and then we looked at peer-to-peer relationships as a key driver within NRC Health. Using the rating as a place to work data from the NRC Health surveys, we compared that to our 3 new groupings. Our first grouping, low manager endorsements, represents departments in which less than 7% of employees were recognized by their direct manager. In this grouping, we found that the data grew 3.53 points. Our second grouping, medium manager endorsements, represented departments in which less than 24% of their employees were recognized. In these departments, we saw on average growth of 4.31 points. And then in our high manager endorsements grouping, where over 24% of employees had been recognized by their direct manager, on average, these departments saw growth of 7.04 points. That's pretty significant growth. Drilling down deeper into these results using the same groupings as before, we'll see if manager recognition within nDorse had an impact on manager investment overall. The data that makes up the manager investment grouping within NRC Health's engagement survey is really a compilation of 3 questions. The first question is, do I benefit from a one-on-one relationship with the person I report to? The second, does the person I report to create opportunities for my professional growth? And finally, do I have all the tools I need to do my job effectively? And when looking at the manager investment growth from 2016 to 2017, here's what we found. In the grouping of low manager endorsements, they grew on average 0.69 points year over year. The medium manager endorsements group grew on average 1.94 points year over year. And then the high manager endorsements group grew on average 7.32 points. But then we wanted to look at one more thing using those same groupings as before. What impact does this have on peer-to-peer relationships? This is going off the assumption that if a manager recognizes their employees, it's going to trickle down into building a positive culture. The peer-to-peer relationships grouping in NRC Health's engagement survey looks at 4 different questions. Do I have friendships with my work colleagues outside of the work environment? Do I have great relationships with others who I work with? Do I look for opportunities to support others I work with? And do the people I work with treat each other with respect? And here's what we found looking at the year-over-year growth of the peer-to-peer relationships grouping. In our low manager endorsements group, we actually found that peer relationships decreased 1.01 points year over year. In our medium manager endorsements grouping, we found that scores on average decreased 0.17 points on the peer-to-peer relationship scores. But in departments that had high manager endorsements of direct reports, we saw peer-to-peer relationship scores grow on average 4.76 points from 2016 to 2017. So really, in conclusion, what we found was, of course, that engagement scores increased across the board. And then when we isolated overall rating as a place to work, manager investment, and peer-to-peer relationships, we did find correlation with manager use of endorsement and the average number of endorsements that employees received. So, to really sum this all up, keep doing the excellent work that you're doing, and thank you for your continued support of building an excellent culture of recognition at UMC.